Who is powerful? Who is smart? Who is powerful? Who is smart? Anybody in this room powerful? Anybody in this room smart? Hold on to that thought, because we're going to work into that in the comments. I am not here to give you a challenge this morning. What I'm going to do is hopefully help you think about your challenge. And for me, I think there's two ways to do that. One of the ways to do that is probably not possible, in my opinion, for you to do that unless you really know yourself well and you know others. Knowing others is a gift and it's a responsibility. And I'm going to encourage you to do that. It's vulnerable to let people know you. But it's only possible to actually be truly powerful when you allow others to know you, and then when you have the gift and the responsibility to know others. And as I said before, I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of doubt in a different way. So I'll give a little bit of two vignettes from my own life so you can know me a little bit as we do this. I tried to think about the things that have enduring effect on you, that shape your life. And for me, it probably had to be growing up in the issue of race. So I grew up in a time in the Northeast where it was a very painful chapter in U.S. history about race in schools. And if you do all your research, you'll realize that busing was a way that people sought to integrate schools. And people did not do well in terms of their personal and social responsibility. It was a really violent time. And it marked a lot about how I thought about school. And I was brought up in a home, and we didn't have anything. I mean, I guess today you would call it poverty. We just didn't know we didn't have anything, because no one else had anything. And so we had no means, and school was very important. So you went to school, and there was great strife. Various communities got bused to different schools, and there was a lot of violence, and I really didn't understand it. I didn't understand how you could actually not know or accept someone because they had a different skin color. I mean, where I grew up, it was only black and white were the issues. We did not have actually a lot of other ethnicities or races. But what was pretty amazing to me was athletics was a big part of my growing up, and in many ways shaped the man that I am. But athletic teams were completely different. They were fully integrated. And in those days, when you would go away to play an away game, you get on the bus, you'd have to wear your tie and your stuff. And when buses would meet you, the schools were in deep conflict. Lots of cops trying to prevent kids and parents from hurting each other. And what quickly became the knowledge was the power of how you behave when you represent something bigger than just your school trying to win the team. When you can represent tolerance, but much more so when you can represent acceptance. It had a big effect in me thinking through what it means to stand up for something, no matter how frightening the circumstances can be. And the second vignette in my life had a lot to do with who I became in terms of my career. I always wanted to be a doctor. I was like on the road. I went to college, got into a program that was going to be undergrad and grad, and it was great. I mean, God really, gave me some pretty lucky opportunities, and I'm going through, and I'm taking my medical courses. I'm coming up on my senior year, and I got 1 year to go, and then we go on to medical school, and a situation occurred where I was in one of my college classes, and it was a giant amphitheater of an auditorium. So there were lots of stone steps, and you rose up and you looked down on, imagine a Greek on the inside, an enclosed Greek. And there was a lecture, and there was a film. And this was a course on obstetrics. And so they showed a film there, and it was a film of a birth, and there was a baby being born. And I passed out cold. Fell down, smashed my head, and I was so thrown by the incident. I was so in doubt that I could actually be a doctor after that. I remember going and meeting my advisor and said, I really can't do this. This isn't going to work. If that happens, what would happen if it was for real? This was only the movie version. So I changed my major on the spot, and I said, well, what else could I do? He says, well, you could teach people to be doctors. I said, okay, I could do that. And so I then went off and worked in juvenile prison for a while. And I said, okay, I need to figure out, I'll go figure if I can work in a place that has got, some stress, I probably could do good in public school. So I went and began to work in juvenile corrections, and it changed the course of my life. And I learned two things very quickly: that the overwhelming majority of youth who were there had done nothing worse than anybody else, including myself in this room, but got caught up in the trap of disbelief based on the color of their skin and their zip code. And that it was an absolute pipeline that once you got into, it was very difficult to get out of. And it had very little to do with real crime, in my opinion. And what it taught me was that the best way to be out of that pipeline was to graduate from high school. So I said, okay, I'm going to go be a teacher. And I moved to New York City, and I never looked back. And it was an amazing intervention in the trajectory of my life, and I couldn't be more proud of where I am. And I guess I wondered about that issue of doubt. Why did I doubt I couldn't have done something? And I thought a lot about that incident as I was preparing my comments this morning to help you think about moments of doubt that are positive and moments of doubt that are negative. And I want to talk about this notion of not being sure of something, maybe not being sure of yourself or what you know, or more importantly, what you don't know around that. Doubt can be either constricting or limiting, or it can be expansive, and it can be catalytic. I think we all know a lot about when it's limiting, when we doubt ourselves. If you're an athlete, it's probably the most fearsome thing in the world is when doubt creeps into you. I don't know if I can actually make the shot. I don't know if I have the strength. I don't know if I can actually execute the play. That kind of doubt is more crippling than an injury. You're a student and you're sitting in front of a major exam. I don't know if I remember how to do this. You can feel it. You can feel it in your gut, those things. That's a very limiting form of doubt. I want to have us think a little bit about a different form of doubt. Not the crippling kind, but the opportunity is that I'm more worried about what I don't know than what I do know around this issue. Having doubt actually can be incredibly helpful. Having doubt can be an opening to solve a problem. It can help give us an insight. If we want to think boldly and create, and we want to inspire, and we want to engage, and you want to choose eventually one of these challenges, then I want to help you think a little bit about the positive power of doubt. And I'm going to give us a couple of examples where I think doubt helped a leader or an individual in ways that are very different than the crippling form of doubt. I think everybody's familiar with Abraham Lincoln, and everybody, maybe some people have actually seen the recent movie that's up for the award on Lincoln, or certainly have read about our president. And he had a deep doubt that a union, a country, could survive if it enslaved people and if it was divided. And there was, at the point he takes over the presidency, there was no other known way for the country to exist. It had always enslaved people. And so he didn't know from experience another way. It was the doubt that this would never allow a country to be truly free if it didn't free all of its inhabitants. And we know the story about how this is an entire country formed the ability to split apart. An entire economy was based on the horrific abomination of the enslavement of another. And there was another part of the country that was like, while our economy is okay, that is actually wrong to do that. The brutal civil war. And it was this doubt about what could be rather than what is that drove his leadership around this. I know there has to be another way, and I don't have it in front of me, and I can't point to it. All I can tell you is that no true democracy can exist. And we kind of know the story. That doubt drove two very powerful sets of leadership. One was the abolition of slavery, and the second one was the reunification of a divided country. There, the ability to doubt what is led to what could be. You think about a guy by the name of Galileo. At the time, he doubted what was not just conventional wisdom, that the earth resides at the center of the solar system, but the doctrine of the church. And at that time, the Catholic Church was more than just a religious institution, it was the seat of knowledge. So the church would say that the sun is not the center of the universe, we are. You had two problems. You had a scientific problem, and you had a faith-based problem. But someone had given him this thing called the telescope, and instead of watching for ships to come into port, he pointed it to the heavens and was able to actually see with his own eyes that what people were telling him might not be true. I can either doubt what I can actually see and go along to get along, or I can stand up and say, this is not possible given what I know. I will probably end up being excommunicated. I will be on house arrest the rest of my life. I will publish it and I will say it, and there will be a huge consequence. And everybody else is telling me I'm wrong. And there's like really serious problems for saying something otherwise. And so the doubt in Galileo that everybody might not be right, I might be, and there's a huge consequence for that, led to the courage to publish and say otherwise. And we've come to understand that not only was he right about that, but that he helped us understand, how do you make a scientific judgment based on evidence rather than based on doctrine, and led the way for people to have the freedom to say, yeah, that's not exactly true around that. The earth is not flat, and there are lots of opportunities for us to understand things. And that doubt was also quite powerful. And I think you also know the story of Newton, the founder of gravity. His problem wasn't that he had discovered this, he couldn't prove it. The math at the time was insufficient. He doubted he was going to be able to explain what he knew. And so in order to do that, he had to create a whole other form of mathematics, calculus to be exact. And the ability to do that was to say, okay, you don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to prove it to you in a language that you don't even know what I can mean. And the ability for him to say, I need to create something to help you understand what I know, and that you have every bit of doubt that it's not possible for me to do so. Wrestled it with his whole life. But the conviction for him, the seeing something other for Lincoln, and the courage in Galileo were three traits that came from this kind of power of doubt. We in this country, for years, and I would have to say for centuries, have struggled about this doubt about who's smart and who is not smart. There's a raging debate about whether smart is what you're born with, or can you actually grow to be smarter? And I want to give you a vignette that I think profoundly describes the fact that smart is not something you are, it is something you become. And it guides everything I believe about school, raising children, my own, helping others, you, running a system where you spend other people's money, the public, about this notion that you can't convince me otherwise, that some people are smart and some people just aren't. I can't believe that, and I want you to understand from cognitive psychology this vignette. I have kids, my own kids. If you might not have your own kids, I'm suspecting you do not. But there might be people in the room who do, or you've got a cousin or a baby, or you've seen a baby. I want you to visualize in your mind a little baby being born. As I tell this story, I'm going to tell about my own kids. Our first kid gets born, and put him in the crib, and my wife and I look over, and it's beautiful. It's just it's what a handsome little kid. And then we stand up and say to each other, this kid is really smart. I know it. This kid is like really, really smart. This baby is going to learn to talk. And then 11 months later, our next kid comes along. We put it in the crib. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful baby. But you just know this one is not smart. It's just, I wish it were otherwise, but it's just not. And then 11 months later, the next baby comes along, and by this point, we're with the kid in the crib. It's like, we're too exhausted to figure out whether this is smart or not smart. I have no idea if this one's going to learn to talk. Maybe, maybe not. I have no idea. No parent on earth thinks like that. Not one. No one thinks that the baby is not going to talk. And we act from day one completely convinced of that, although there's no evidence whatsoever that this child can talk yet. And so if you do a study of cultures on the entire planet, when the mother or the father have the baby for the first 4 or 5 weeks, they talk like baby talk. It's like, oh, and you know what it looks like. It's like you little baby, you don't really use words. And then almost universally across the globe it ends. And you just stop. And you just stop talking to the kid. Good morning. Time to get up. Going to change that diaper. Come on down. We're going to bring you downstairs. Say hi to mama. Here's daddy. Look at your little table. And you talk just as if the baby's going to talk back to you. And then you begin to demand it. Here's your cup. Say cup. You can say cup. Say cup. And the baby says cup. And then says other words. Just like it was always supposed to be. You don't have any doubt that that is the case. And then you've witnessed the most difficult task known to the human mind. The transposition of audio symbolic representation to speech. The formation of speech, much more difficult than those AP classes you're taking, much more difficult than any essay you have to write. And then right after that, we demand the next most difficult thing of any human being. You're going to read. You're going to take a symbol, and it's going to have a representation in your mind to a visual, and then you're going to declare it through verbal speech. And we just fill the baby's world with print. We stick books in the crib. We read to the baby while you hold the baby, almost as if we think the baby is reading along with us. And the baby begins to read. And we go along. And then somewhere in kind of American education, about 4th grade, something creeps in to this, of course all will speak, and of course all will, and it's math. I rest my case. Then we begin to think, well, math is for some. I just don't have the math gene. Some people are like really good at math, and some people are just really not good at math. And then we begin to sort those who we think are good at it, those who we think might not be good at it. And we begin a kind of brand in education that is education by elimination. It's very, very problematic. And we make whole constructs based on the belief that some will learn and some might not. Summer school is designed for those who didn't learn it, and we budget for it before the school year even begins. There's a built-in assumption that someone's going to need it. And then we build in constructs like valedictorian, like there'll only be one smartest person in a whole school. Just one. I think the entire thing is crazy. The notion that we know now that developing deep, deep intellectual ability is fundamentally not about innate capacity. It's about something we call grit. It is about persistence, and a special kind of persistence, not the kind that you practice over and over and over again to do a great layup or to throw a perfect spiral. No, that is a different form of grit. I'm talking about grit that when we apply it to an ill-defined, complex task, I truly don't know how to do it, and I can't do it, I gotta give up. What we know, famous scientist right now in the world, her name is Eleanor Lee Duckworth, and has done tremendous studies about the fact that people, but particularly students, who persist in problems, a dilemma, a challenge, where we don't know the answer, not sure how to get to the answer, persistence leads to getting smarter, more than what you bring to the table. And so the idea of how we stand by people to coach and help them persist through is an obligation both to the self and to each other around that. And I leave you with the notion that doubt in the positive sense and grit in the opportunity sense is allowed for everybody to be powerfully smart. I'm going to leave you with a story of doubt that's difficult to hear. And it's the power of possibly not believing. There's a famous guy, and pardon my ability to speak Japanese well. So, Tsutomu Yakamuchi. Tsutomu is a very, very famous man. He's the only known man on the planet to have lived and survived 2 atomic explosions. Tsutomu lived in Japan and traveled to Hiroshima in August of 1945, and he was buying for a shipyard. He was a shipyard worker. And when there, he experienced the dropping of the first atomic bomb and was terribly burned and lived. It's a very unimaginable pain. And all he wanted to do was get home because he would be safe. And he had witnessed this horrific thing, unlike anything he had ever known. So there was no way to even understand what had just taken place. So he literally crawls his way through the city of Hiroshima to the outskirts where he finds the last train that leaves. And he's going to go home to where he's going to be safe, his hometown of Nagasaki. He takes the train and gets home to Nagasaki and goes to work immediately in a factory and tells people, you can't understand what I've seen, but it's going to happen again. Because no one would use this thing if they didn't have another one. You've got to believe me. And people are trying to doubt, not that you might be lying, you invented something, you got badly burned somehow, but this is not what you could possibly be. This is not possible. We are winning the war, this is not possible. And folks in the factory were in serious doubt of what he was trying to say. And what he told them was, you're going to see a flash, and you have to get behind the strongest wall. And that's the only way you're going to live. And then the government officials come in and say, you are fomenting dissent, and you are actually treasonous to say this could happen in this country. So we take you and we remove you and we put you in house arrest. And the next morning, tragically, in Nagasaki, the second bomb drops. And it was just the folks in the factory who went to the wall of this factory after the blast who survived. And the notion of should we believe what we can't understand that could actually affect our lives is a huge mystery. It's without evidence. Do we have to trust the other in something we can't quite understand? Tsutomu used that notion of people failing to believe in him, doubting in him, to actually make the rest of his life about that we should have non-proliferation of nuclear bombs. He died a couple of years ago, and as we know in his work, it was not in vain. We have struggled ever since, never to detonate another, ever, in this planet. And when we think about someone who's trying to provoke us to believe in something that we don't seem to have any evidence for, there's a power to say, maybe Mike is right. Maybe Shaniqua might be right. Maybe Jose might be right. Let me listen a little bit deeper around that. There is power in what you're doing in the challenge. I can't tell you enough how impressive it is to see you here. There is power way beyond solving the challenge that you're going to do. It is going to give you courage and conviction, and it's going to allow you to stand up for others. I'm going to close with only the best words I know that others have said about this. We have a school in LAUSD, Ambassador, and it's a school dedicated to RFK. And for very obvious reasons. We lost him on that site. When he went to South Africa in 1966, he gave a speech to a country that could not have imagined anything but apartheid. There can only be white rule in an overwhelmingly black country. It can't be otherwise. There's no doubt it can be anything but that. And so in his speech, which we have carved in the wall of our school, he reminds us that it is from numberless acts of courage on behalf of others that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts out to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against an injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different points of energy, these ripples build to a current which can sweep down the mightiest wall of opposition or resistance. So my goodness, God, if we can end apartheid in South Africa, cannot every single solitary youth graduate college and career ready from Los Angeles Unified School District? That is going to rest in the power of you and what you will stand up and do for the other. Let this challenge give you that courage and conviction to do that. Enjoy.